Hello again and welcome back. Today we're going to learn what's called a stocking stitch. Yesterday we talked some about how purl stitches will make a bump and knit stitches will make a V. And today that'll be a little more clear. To do a stocking stitch on what we call the right side, just like you have a right side and a wrong side of a shirt, we're going to knit. Now I know that this is the right side because my tail end is off of the bottom right. It doesn't particularly matter which side of your work that you're working on because this is only a practice thing right now. So we're going to do lots of stitches on this one, and then we're either going to cut it off or unravel it depending on how frugal you are with your yarn. So back to stocking stitch. We're going to start by knitting our first row. So I'm going to, remember our knit goes in from this side to the back, wrap around, pull your loop to the front, and slide off. From the front to the back, wrap your loop around, pull it to the front, and slide it off. So we're just going to continue, and you knit at your pace, and I'll knit at my pace. And if you need to stop the video to catch up to get to the end of your row, that'll be fine. So I'm just going to knit on to the end of my row, and you knit on to the end of your row. I would stop the video, but it's more trouble to stop it and start it than it is to just let you watch me knit to the end of my row. And there we go. We are at the end of the row. So now we're going to turn our work. Now, since this is stocking stitch, we're going to knit one row, then we're going to purl the next row. Do you see the bumps along the bottom? Okay, that means it's time to purl this row in stocking stitch. So from purl, remember from yesterday, you go in from this direction. You may have to hold it with your thumb for the first stitch. Over the top, pull through to the back, and off. Go from the right, over the top, pull the loop through to the back, and off. There we go. And so I'm just going to continue and purl all the way across this row. Now you may have seen me wrap the yarn around my ring finger. Everybody has their own favorite way of holding their yarn. You can find all kind of videos on YouTube, you know, how to hold your yarn, whether you hold it continental, European. It's up to you. I've simply found that when I wrap my yarn this way around my ring finger, that it helps me keep my yarn flowing smoothly. For years, I didn't wrap it around my finger that way. For years, I just held it this way, just holding it, okay, and did it that way. Over time, you'll become comfortable with how you like to hold your own yarn. Okay, so now I've purled all the way across that row. If you turn it around, you'll see that you have V's. Stockinette stitch is the traditional looking V's that you think of when you see knitting. But what's on the back of the stockinette stitch? A bunch of bumps. Now if you spread out our garter stitch, you'll see a bump and a V and a bump and a V and a bump and a V. You won't see that with the garter stitch. There won't be V's between the rows of bumps. So let's do 2 more rows. Okay, and I'm going to do them pretty quick, as quick as I can. And it'll give you a better sense of what the stocking stitch actually looks like. So while I'm doing that, why would you want a stocking stitch versus a garter stitch? Well, a stocking stitch is thinner, so it works for socks, thus the word stocking stitch. I don't know that I would ever use a knitted garter stitch to hold up my stockings like an old-fashioned garter. I'm sure that's maybe how it got started, but that's not what I would use it for. A garter stitch is thicker, and it works well for scarves. Another reason that we're going to use a garter stitch for the scarf that we're going to make in this project is that a stocking stitch tends to roll. Now, it will roll if I did this whole thing in stocking stitch like this. When I got finished, the whole thing would curl up like that and make a tube, because the purl bumps push it and make it roll up. But when we knit every row or purl every row, you have an even number of knit stitches and purl stitches, and so none of them are able to overcome each other and cause them to curl up. Okay, so now you get a really good idea. You got V's on the side, on one side that you knit, and you have bumps on the side that you purled. So since this side is bumps, in keeping with our stocking stitch, we're going to purl this row. I remember my first sweater that I ever knit, it was just a plain stocking stitch sweater, which means it looked like V's all up the front side. If you turned it wrong side out, of course, it looked like bumps. But there were, in several places where I made mistakes. And to this day, I'll find mistakes in my knitting. No one knits perfectly. In fact, our next video, tomorrow's video, is going to address mistakes. So if you've made some mistakes, you have holes in your knitting, or it's growing wider or growing narrower, those are things we're going to address tomorrow. See, I almost made a mistake there. So anyway, you would see on my sweater lots of places where I purled instead of knitted, so there were bumps instead of V's. It's because I had a hard time. No one explained to me what a stocking stitch should look like on the right side or the wrong side. So here we go again. On the right side, a stocking stitch will look like V's. On the wrong side, a stocking stitch will look like bumps. So if we were going to knit something in all stocking stitch, here are bumps showing, therefore we need to do purl stitches. On this side, there are V stitches, therefore we need to do knit stitches. So your homework for today, do a few more rows of stocking stitch. Knit on the rows that are showing V's. When you have your yarn ready to go and ready to start a row, if it's showing V's, you want to knit. If you are on this end and you were ready to knit, and if your working yarn was over here and you have bumps, then you want to purl. So you knit on the V side, purl on the bump side. And you'll start to notice that this is a lot thinner than this nice squishy garter stitch. So today's homework, spend a little time knitting a row and purling a row and making some nice stocking stitch fabric. And happy knitting!